Homelessness is a pervasive problem all throughout the nation. Hawaii was at times placed as having the greatest homeless population per capita in the nation for many years. Today, we fall second to New York. Understanding and researching the biopsychosocial-spiritual model of our state of Hawaii's homeless epidemic will help to unravel the challenges that the homeless population faces as individuals, communities, and as a society. Various dynamics contribute to Oahu's socioeconomic epidemic regarding homelessness. There are biological, psychological, social, and spiritual factors that all play a role in contributing to the homeless population that is often overlooked and misunderstood. Looking through the lenses of those who have experienced homelessness, we want to also search and uncover the ways that homelessness affects an individual biologically, psychologically, socially, and spiritually. Without exploring these factors in depth, solutions to this island-wide epidemic will often never reach its full potential.
Hi there, this is Christy Lavoie, and I'm going to briefly talk about the biological component of the BPSS model and how it relates to our chosen minority population, which is the homeless community. Now, when we're taking a look at the biological dimension, what we're really wanting to take a closer look at is what is the biological impact on being homeless. So in other words, how do situations such as prolonged stress, exposure to the elements, nutritional deficiencies, how do all of these things impact an individual biologically? It was reported in 2013 that most deaths of the homeless each year are mainly due to cancer, heart attacks, and diabetes. When examining the relationship between illnesses and homelessness, it has been found that illness can either precede and contribute to homelessness, develop as a result of being homeless, or oftentimes require complicated treatment that the homeless typically do not have access to proper care. Malnutrition is huge within the homeless community. As you can imagine, these individuals don't often have access to foods that are high in nutrients and vitamins that we need in order to sustain and maintain our well-being. As an example, a homeless man or woman may be offered, say, a sandwich from a passerby from a local fast food restaurant, and that might be all that they have to eat for that day and then remaining few days after that. Eating that way over a long period of time, coupled with foods that are high in preservatives such as canned goods, they are often easily to access and they're cheap, but the downfall of that is eating foods that are high in preservatives over a long period of time is going to have detrimental impacts to your system and overall your nutrition. Venereal diseases is pretty self-explanatory, and then hepatitis is also huge within the homeless community because substance abuse is prevalent, and with that there's often the sharing of IVs or needles, and that's going to spread diseases such as hepatitis. Researchers have found that homeless people in their 50s actually suffer from more geriatric conditions than those who are decades older but have a roof over their heads. This is often because homeless individuals face challenging living conditions and endure a variety of complex interplay of health and social deprivation. These challenges then lead to high rates of early mortality when compared to the general population. The life expectancy is actually 25 to 30 years less for the homeless when compared to non-homeless counterparts. Another biological impact that I think is super important to talk about is the concept of toxic stress, especially within the child homeless population. So for toxic stress in homeless children, it's especially prevalent because these individuals often don't have access to their families, institutions such as schools or healthcare. So with that, those high levels of cortisol that remain within their system for long periods of time are going to ultimately alter their brain functioning and have implications for their neurological functioning as well. So if you think about it, for an example, as a child, not knowing where your next meal is going to come from for an extended amount of time, not knowing what the weather is going to bring that day and how it's going to impact your day or your well-being, and then not knowing if you're going to be subjected to sexual or physical violence that day. All of this creates those high levels of cortisol, and over a long period of time, you're going to see some adverse impacts that are quite devastating.
This is Abigail Eli, and I'm going to be talking about the psychological impact and how it affects our homeless population. According to Hawaii News Now, as of April 2023, the Institute for Human Services discussed the results of a survey regarding the homeless population living on the island of Oahu's North Shore District. These results showed that 60% of those who were homeless in the North Shore area were suffering from some form of mental illness. Mental illness definitely has a very wide and broad spectrum of different disorders that are prevalent among our Hawaii's homeless communities. Disorders such as general anxiety disorder, schizophrenia, PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, alcohol use disorder, methamphetamine use disorder. In fact, any substances is found to be a psychological disorder. There's so many different disorders that are affecting our homeless population here in the state of Hawaii. The 2023 Point in Time Count Comprehensive Report was published in May of 2023. The results of this report really do reflect the seriousness of the psychological issues facing our unhoused and unsheltered population on the island of Oahu. According to the 2023 PIT report, 39% of the homeless population surveyed were found to have mental illness. 11% of those were veterans. 31% had substance use problems. There are many psychological disorders that actually cause someone to become homeless, such as schizophrenia, dementia, post-traumatic stress disorder. Even the anxiety and depression can cause a person to become homeless. And then, of course, there's the substance use disorders and many other psychological disorders that could cause a person to become homeless, such as like dementia. Dementia, Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, you can find many of those who have this disorder wandering the streets of Oahu. And because Medicaid and Medicare cannot provide housing options through medical care for a person who is able to provide for their basic needs, such as, they're able to feed themselves, bathe, and, they can dress themselves. And if they have decent mobility where they're able to walk, Medicaid does not pay for that person to be cared for, to be put into a care home. So if they don't have someone that will, like a family member that's willing to support them and take care of them, those particular people will be found wandering the streets. I actually care for an elderly woman who doesn't have any family, and she has dementia, and she was found wandering the streets, falling, and although she had a home at the time, she did not know how to get back to it. That was super dangerous for her, and because of the dementia, she wouldn't remember to pay her bills, and so she was potentially on her way to becoming homeless, and there would have been no one to care for her. And when we tried to get her the help that she needed, there was nothing that was able, that in the medical world, that was able to support her or to help her to get into a care home. So this is a problem where we're going to find people with that kind of psychological disorders wandering our streets and becoming homeless. We also have, those who are veterans who have major PTSD because of the trauma that they experienced in war. And similarly, those who have depression or those who have general anxiety disorders or other things like schizophrenia can be found homeless. But one of the things is that they will continue to be homeless if they have these disorders, because they often struggle to keep their appointments or don't remember when their appointments are. They tend to lose their paperwork because they can't remember where they put it. And so they will find that they won't be able to keep up with the housing or, job employment and things, and just regular applications for Social Security or a steady income or food stamps. Many of those things are going to fall to the wayside just because of these psychological disorders that are left untreated.
Hi everyone, this is Alana, and I'll be doing the social component of the BPSS model. Hawaii has an ongoing social issue of homelessness that impacts a very diverse population. 44.9% in every 10,000 Hawaiians are homeless as of 2019. Some key factors regarding the social issues of homelessness are neglect, not feeling accepted, kids falling behind or not going to school because of the lack of resources, sleep, and discrimination inside the classroom. Social issues regarding adults, including having a hard time getting a job or holding a job because of the lack of resources, no transportation, or no address to put down in applications. Other factors may be veterans having a hard time adjusting to the world after serving, people experiencing mental health issues, single parents are having a hard time supporting themselves and their children, yet it all draws back to one thing that America is so fixated on: money. Losing social connections can make homelessness harder to deal with. In addition to other adversities that homeless people face, many of those individuals face social isolation due to the fact that most of society ignores them and denies their humanity. Put aside everything you think you know about homelessness. Most homeless aren't panhandlers. About 1.6 million of them each year are children. The stress of living in poverty can majorly impact the child's brain development and can have long-term effects on their physical and mental health. These effects then follow them into adulthood, and that is when the cycle of generational poverty continues. Children and young adults who are experiencing homelessness are more likely to have greater health problems and are more likely to suffer from diseases due to the lack of proper treatment. Poor health results in children staying home from school for weeks, holding them back in the education system. Without stable living conditions or finances, it takes a bunch of steps to get that type of care. I have 5 cousins whose parents are currently living on the beach, experiencing homelessness and substance abuse. Both my grandma and my mom took in my 5 cousins because they witnessed them, who were all underage at the time, struggling and living in conditions that no other children should be living in. They didn't know how to receive or sign up for medical care because they had no prior knowledge about it. They had no food, they barely had any clothes, and they couldn't even get to school because they had no money or any ways to get there. Education is essential for children to acquire the tools they need to break out of the cycle of poverty for themselves and for their families. But how can they do that when society creates such a negative effect on homelessness? We tend to see a lot of these children put out there or on the spot for their living situations, the way they dress, their hygiene, and so much more. But what they don't realize is that the children who are experiencing homelessness don't have the access to resources or home security or even the privilege to have certain things like other children do. Some can't come to school because they have no transportation. Some won't come to school because they are being discriminated against. Others won't come because they may not have the school supplies or the resources. Homelessness also makes families and children more vulnerable to other forms of trauma, such as physical and sexual assault, witnessing violence, or substance abuse. Half of school-age children experience anxiety, depression, or withdrawal. Without social support systems, adults are having a hard time getting a job or holding a job. Hawaii's overall unemployment rate is around 3.2% year-round, and 10.4% are in the Waianae area alone. So why do 10% fail to have jobs? Some just don't have the education or the experience. Some face mental illnesses or substance abuse. Some of them have criminal backgrounds. Being homeless, you don't have a stable house, which means you can't put that on applications that you have an address. Others don't have their IDs or can get their IDs. While being homeless, there's a lot of people that either steal their stuff or it can get misplaced. So it's hard for them as people to apply for jobs because of their living situations and conditions. And then when applying for jobs, they're judged and looked at because of how they're dressed. So a lot of them tend to just be scared to seek help because they don't want to be judged.
Hello, this is Esteban Doria. I'm completing the spiritual component of the BPSS model. The spiritual and health can also be defined as the search for ultimate meaning, purpose, and significance in relation to one's self, family, others, community, nature, and the sacred, expressed through beliefs, values, traditions, and practices. When understanding this slide, just looking at the plain pictures, I think they speak volumes. In the top pictures, you get to see what loneliness looks like for someone who is homeless and it has mental health. They tend to deal with it alone. We have to remember that a lot of these individuals still seek God, still seek religion, still seek spirituality, their own internal drive for spirituality. And we can't forget that that is driven by the community. That is driven by the perception that the community have for the perception for the need that they have. Excuse me, whether it's food, whether it's a simple conversation, or hello, how are you? How are you doing today? But it could be shelter. It could be the things that usually church and church facilities tend to offer to the homeless, and that tends to build trust with the community and just religion itself, right? It helps them build who they are internally, and you hope that middle picture you see is what they lean on and resort to is God, trying to seek a higher level of spirituality to transcend their current status, to seek something better. But this is very crucial to understand is the community really does play a major role in their lives. There are several things that homeless individuals seek, and when they have nothing else in their lives, the only thing that they will demand is respect and dignity. This is a quote by Franklin D. Roosevelt, which states, "Religion, by teaching man his relationship to God, gives the individual a sense of his own dignity and teaches him to respect himself by respecting his neighbors." This quote couldn't be more accurate to the homelessness and the problem in homelessness that we deal with every day. They are our neighbors. They understand that they might not be at a level that is the person that walks in front of them. But giving them the respect, telling them how are you, helping them where you can, spreading the word of God, trying to get them to their mental health treatment. It's all encompassing to their better health. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. Matthew chapter 25, verse 35 through 36. Absolutely defines and explains what we should be doing to improve someone's spirituality when they are needing that help. Extend that hand, be positive towards them, encourage them, provide them the shelter, provide them the resources they need. This is what we do as therapists. This is what we do as professionals. This is what we should do as normal human beings to other human beings.
When examining the biopsychosocial-spiritual model to another framework, I decided to take a closer look at the biomedical model and how it relates or differs to the BPSS framework that we talked about today. In fact, the biopsychosocial-spiritual model was actually derived from the biomedical model because this model was often looked at in traditional medicine. So, For example, a practitioner who focuses on the biomedical model may see a patient and only focus on environmental or internal causes or impacts related to any ailments or issues that they may be experiencing. With this framework, the mind and body are said to function independently. And although it is recognized that there are psychological consequences to a particular ailment or issue, it's not recognized that there could be psychological causes of illness or a certain circumstance. With this, there's also usually very little recognition of the whole person. And comparing that to the biopsychosocial-spiritual model, as we just learned, it looks at a combination of factors, the bio, psycho, social, and spiritual causes or impacts. The mind and body are also connected, and it is said that illnesses and circumstances may have psychological causes and consequences. This is going to be more of a holistic approach.
Ethics and counseling. The American Counseling Association Code of Ethics sets the standard for professionals and counselors with the purpose of protecting the dignity and well-being of clients. A very critical technique or therapeutic technique that I am fascinated by is a higher advanced level of CBT, which is called the dialectical behavioral therapy. It is a type of talk therapy, a psychotherapy. It's specifically adapted for people who experience emotions very intensely. Dialectical means to combine opposite ideas. DBT focuses on helping people accept the reality of their lives and their behaviors, as well as helping them learn to change their lives, including their unhelpful behaviors. Now, the main goal of DBT is for therapists to use it is to strike a balance between validation or acceptance of who you are and your challenges and the benefits of that change.
One of the gray areas that we covered when we were studying the homeless population is in this area where in 2014 Oahu had passed the assisted community treatment law, which was amended in 2019, and then it was amended again in 2023. This law was created to allow the homeless who are severely mentally ill to be given medical treatment, regardless of whether they agree to it or not. It could be homeless that maybe are lying in their own feces and really just don't have the ability to say, "Hey, I need better care. I can't make these decisions on my own." Then psychologists or doctors can recommend them to the courts to have a guardian ad litem appointed to them. Some people might say it's wrong to force a person to have to get medical care. So the way this law works is that whether this person refuses treatment, like say, getting psychoanalytic medications, a person who is maybe not mentally capable of making those decisions might deny it. But with this, with a court appointing a guardian ad litem, they are not allowed. Basically, their rights are stripped away, and they can force them to take the medication. Now, some people might say, "Hey, that's terrible. That's not ethical. That you're forcing that on them." And from the ethical standpoint, that we would not do any harm to our patients or to our clients. And so would it be wrong for us to continue to let them to live in their feces? And I love what the article in Hawaii News Now spoke on. It talked about how is it more wrong for us to allow them to live in their feces where they're getting all kinds of infections, to where a lot of them are getting amputations, because we're all just turning a blind eye to it. So it can be a gray area. It's like, is it ethical or not ethical for us to get involved and make sure that that person is no longer able to cause harm to themselves in this way because of their mental state. Reflecting on everything that we have researched and presented, it is evident that studying every aspect of the biopsychosocial spiritual model is really crucial to understanding what the homeless population is enduring. Without this clear perspective of the challenges a homeless individual faces, it's really difficult to effectively treat that client that has to live in these kinds of different environments. We've got to take a hard look at all that we've discussed above if we are going to be effective psychologists. So biologically, just when we look at this picture, one of the things that the homeless have to endure biologically is that they are found to age at a more rapid speed. Um, a lot of times it's because they fall into substance abuse, and they're more likely to suffer with detrimental and acute and chronic illnesses. On top of that, without the appropriate support, mental health issues go unchecked, and that too leads to homelessness. Unfortunately, the life expectancy of the homeless population is decades less than their counterparts. From the psychological aspect, as we spoke of before, issues like depression, anxiety disorders, PTSD, dementia, and so many other psychological disorders, they all have been they have had an impact in causing homelessness, but they have also had a major impact in causing the cycle of homelessness to continue, where it is very difficult to break out of homelessness. Psychological disorders are often playing a part in chronic unemployment and educational absenteeism. It plays a part in appointment instability, and it plays a part in social isolation. Substance abuse is often used to cope with psychological distress that also adds to the continued patterns a homeless individual can get stuck in. Socially, the homeless are definitely affected, and things like neglect, not feeling accepted, the kids falling behind or not going to school because the lack of resources, not even able to get a proper amount of sleep, and the discrimination inside the classroom. Adults, they suffer socially as well through struggling to find or hold employment because of the lack of resources, the fact that they're not having great transportation, or that they don't have an address to put down for applications. Single parents, they're going to struggle to support themselves while caring for their children simultaneously. There are so many different social aspects that are affecting our homeless population. Interestingly enough, the homeless are also affected spiritually, because many of the homeless are depending on charities or religious institutions to help them meet their daily needs. Things like soup kitchens and places that provide, or charities that provide hygiene, shelter, solitude, prayer. They're often sought out. Oftentimes, religious organizations have all kinds of programs that help the homeless population to overcome addictions. They offer resources for mental health help, and then employment or housing opportunities. A lot of times, though, because the homeless are feeling embarrassed, or because they don't have the greatest hygiene, or they have a criminal history, they're afraid of being judged, the perception of being judged. Many of the homeless will reject any notion of association with someone based on their homeless status. So they may not reach out for the help that is needed, even if they are allowed to go to the churches. Many of them will feel like I'm not able to do that, or I'm not worthy to do that. The perceptions people have of the homeless as being criminals or substance users often cause the homeless to isolate themselves from continuing active spiritual pursuits.
When taking into account everything that we've learned throughout this project and presentation as it pertains to the homeless population and the unique challenges and the detrimental impacts and overall the tragic conditions that they're faced with every day, I think it's really important when we're looking at recommendations for future action that we are really focusing on the development of integrated, easily accessible, and low barrier on demand medical, mental health, substance abuse delivery programs. A more team-centered approach would be ideal. Evidence-based medical, mental health, and substance abuse treatment would be provided while strengthening the linkages between public and private organizations. All of this while still taking into account any cultural barriers that might be in place with access to care.
With all that we are researching and coming to understand, I would love to see how taking a Biopsychosocial-spiritual approach might enlighten the world of psychology to see beyond just the one aspect affecting a person's life, but how there are many different aspects that have influenced their patterns, behaviors, choices, and personalities. Will it make us better psychologists with stronger ethical values as we take everything we have just learned to heart?